Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
Joshua Shrum. He is a very talented steward, very knowledgeable.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. This is one of those podcasts where I listen to every episode. I love what he's putting out there.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. Josh Shrum.
Parcels of Knowledge. Does a fantastic job with that podcast.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.
Good morning, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Today we got something special in the works. This is something that I've been waiting for a very long time. I don't think I've ever even told you guys that I was waiting on this. Way back in the Kim training episodes. That was the episodes where I attended my region's yearly training. Renfro had talked about the OIG contacting him about payments when it comes to the grievance procedure. And he did say that in terms of Article 15, he thought something good would come out of it. So I've been patiently waiting and patiently waiting and patiently waiting until finally, now there has been a report. It is dated January 15th, 2026. So this is a day old. Sorry, I am a little bit late. But yes, you heard me right. This is going to be an OIG report that talks about the amount of money management has spent on grievances. It's called grievance management. It's from the Office of Inspector General. I'm going to read it in most of its entirety, and I think it's going to be a very good thing. Most of this I'm going to react to in real time, so bear with me if it seems like I'm reading, but I think this is important. I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm a little bit worried that, it may be used as a tool against us to try and say, hey, look at what the union's doing. They're bad guys. They're trying to take all this money from us. But in reality, I think that the OIG had understood the part that management plays in terms of how much it's really just management's fault. And to be honest, though, when you're standing next to the devil, everyone looks good. So it's kind of expected. But without further ado, I am going to go through this report. This is audit report number 25-068-R26, if you want to go find it. January 15th, 2026. It's titled Grievance Management. All right, so if you're not familiar with this, normally the OIG does audit reports, and when they do, a lot of times they give recommendations to the Postal Service, and the Postal Service will respond to those recommendations. That is the format of these things. Normally, they kind of format it like we kind of format grievances, so I'm going to go through the highlights. Background. The U.S. Postal Service paid out more than $866 million in resolution of almost 3.5 million grievance payments from fiscal years 2022 through 2024. Grievances are typically complaints lodged by individual employees or unions about the implementation or interpretation of collective bargaining and local agreements concerning wages, hours, and conditions of employment. What we did. Our objective was to evaluate the Postal Service's management of grievances. We analyzed data from various Postal Service systems to identify trends, risk areas, and anomalies. We reviewed 25 facilities and labor relations offices in 8 districts and conducted interviews with management and employees at these locations to gain an understanding of their grievance payments. What we found: although total grievance payments nationwide trended slightly downward from fiscal year 2022 and 2024, some districts and facilities incurred high payment amounts or experienced significant increases in payments. Grievance issues related to overtime and improper work assignment accounted for some of the most significant recurring grievance payments nationwide. In addition, field management entered into binding local agreements with unions that contained escalating remedies, did not always align with current operational needs, and did not have defined end or revision dates. Lastly, management did not always maintain a standardized, centralized repository that contained local agreements and did not consistently complete all required elements of decision letters in the grievance and arbitration tracking systems for payments. Wow, that's a shocker. Recommendations and management comments. We made 8 recommendations for the Postal Service to improve its management of grievances, reduce recurring grievances, clarify policy, and improve tracking. Postal Service management agreed with 7 and disagreed with 1. We consider management's comments responsive to recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8, and will pursue recommendation 6 through the audit resolution process. Management's comments and our evaluation at the end of each finding and recommendation. See Appendix C for management's comments in their entirety. Okay, so now I'm not going to read the transmittal letter, but I am going to read the first page of the results next. Results. This report presents the results of our self-initiated audit of the U.S. Postal Service's management of grievances and its impact on the organization. Our objective was to evaluate the Postal Service's management of grievances. All right, so it's going to talk about defining a grievance. We're not going to go through that because we already know what a grievance is and what LMOUs are, especially if you're a listener of the podcast. Grievance payments. The Postal Service paid over $866 million in grievance payments from fiscal years 2022 through 2024. In general, total dollars paid over these 3 years trended downward. However, the number of payments remained relatively steady for the same period, between about 1.1 and 1.2 million payments annually. The amounts paid peaked in fiscal year 2022 at about $303 million and then decreased to about $268 million in fiscal year 2024. So they're paying about $300 million per year. All right. Of the 4 major unions, NALC representatives filed the most grievances. Oh yeah, over 404,000. And their employees received the highest number of grievance payments, 2.4 million individual payments. However, APWU employees received the most in grievance payment amounts. They received $372 million, which came out to an average amount per payment of $546, and it's got it broken down. The NALC would be $145 per payment. The other 2 unions are $460 and $376. Although the average amount paid per grievance payment is below $1,000, some employees receive far more than that in grievance payouts. Nationwide, 76 employees received more than $100,000 each in grievance payments from fiscal year 2022 through 2024, with the top 10 employees receiving total payment amounts ranging from more than $197,000 to just over $367,000. Of the top 10 payees, 8 were carriers from facilities in Chicago, Illinois. All right, shout out to Chicago. The OIG's giving Chicago a shout out. So top 10 employees, they made a total of $2,522,683 in grievance payments. Man, some employee in Chicago is making $300,000 in grievance payments. That is amazing. And the fact that out of the top 10, carriers got 9 of the positions, with only 1 being in Wisconsin. The only exception to Illinois was a Louisiana carrier, who was employee number 3. They got $277,534. Holy shit. That is great. Well, I mean, it's not good that the grievances have to be filed, but it's good that we're getting our people paid. Good for them. All right, grievance issue codes. Management handling grievances are responsible for selecting the appropriate issue code when entering grievances into GATS. These codes are used to categorize the complaint or alleged violation of an agreement and to track and monitor grievances. However, this selection is subjective because supervisors can select any code they wish through a drill-down menu. For example, a supervisor at one facility could select overtime work for an issue. Another supervisor could select Article 8 overtime for the exact same issue. So, let me tell you, highest grievance payment activity by issue code. Overtime work, it was $107 million. Second in line was something to do with the clerks I'm about to go over anyway. Third in line, non-compliance, $39 million. Fourth, performance of bargaining unit work, $35 million. Fifth, employees not on overtime list, which I assume it would mean, that would mean improper mandation, which is $35 million. So, from fiscal year 2022 to 24, the issue code with the highest number of grievance payments and the amount was overtime work. The second highest issue code by total amount paid was MS 47TL-5, which pertains to an agreement that stipulates custodians can receive additional compensation when certain facilities do not use 90% of their calculated annual custodial work hours. The third highest issue code by total amount was noncompliance, which is generally awarded for failure to follow the terms of the national agreement for a previously settled and arbitrated grievance. Finding summary. All right, so Postal Service management did not consistently manage grievances effectively. While grievances are a nationwide issue, difficulties managing them occur at the local level, as each district is responsible for overseeing its own grievance management and relies on its own methods and practices. Although nationwide, grievance payments declined from fiscal years 22 through 24, certain districts and facilities paid out high costs or experienced sharp increases. Significant grievance activity stemmed from issues such as overtime, cross-craft assignments, and management's performing of bargaining unit work. Additionally, some local management entered into abiding agreements with the union that did not have an expiration or revision dates, established perpetual remedies, or included conditions that increased costs over time. Furthermore, management did not always maintain adequate documentation to support grievance payouts. Ooh, surprise, surprise. All right, finding 1. Grievance management needs improvement. Postal Service management did not always effectively manage grievances. Although grievance payments nationwide trended slightly downward, we identified several locations that incurred some of the highest monetary payment amounts or where grievance payments and amounts had increased. We reviewed 25 facilities and labor relations offices in 8 districts where we find controls over grievance management could be strengthened. Most notably, this included management's oversight of grievances in the Illinois 1 district, overtime-related issues, and improper work assignments, which covered employees crossing crafts and management performing bargaining unit work. We identified several critical areas that included some of the highest monetary payment amounts or where grievance payments and amounts had increased. While we reviewed 8 districts where we found control over grievance management could be strengthened, the Illinois 1 district was one of the most egregious, having over $78,000 payments totaling $41 million between the time period. The amounts paid increased by $17 million from about $7 million in 22 to over $24 million in 24. The top 24 facilities included Chicago post offices and branches with grievance activity totaling more than $31 million. The two top grievance categories were noncompliance and request for information at the Illinois post office. And it talks about how in 2022, a request for information in that post office was 300,000. Noncompliance was 600,000. In 23, RFIs were still 300,000. Noncompliance was 2 million. And in 24, RFIs were 3.5 million and noncompliance were 7 million. So you could see that really sharp increase. They didn't really learn. Mike Cariff, I guess you're doing something okay over there. Shout out to you guys in Chicago. You guys need to start teaching the entire country how to get their members paid if they're not following the contract. All right, so it also talks about Chicago NALC branches direct payments, as if that's a bad thing. I don't see why it would be, but they talked about how in 22 they paid the branch 200,000. In 23 they paid the branch 3.5 million, and in 24 they paid the branch 6 million. So Illinois One Management attributed the high grievance payments to practices by previous management of Chicago post offices that failed to properly manage grievances. This mismanagement trickled down to supervisors who consistently missed meetings with the union and delayed monetary payments, which prompted additional grievances. This series of noncompliance ultimately escalated into arbitration awards requiring payouts for noncompliance with the grievance process. Once the award went into effect, RFIs from the union increased by 925%, which continued to trigger instances of the $2,500 award payout. Additionally, some stations and branches had their own separate remedies specific to each unit, based on prior arbitration awards where management had to pay monetary payments for each day they failed to respond to an RFI. These violations would likewise trigger the $2,500 noncompliance payment. Districts can successfully manage grievances more effectively if they focus extra resources and update existing practices. For example, management in the Illinois 1 district implemented several changes and reassessed existing practices to mitigate noncompliance activity and improve responsiveness to RFI deadlines. District management appointed a new postmaster in Chicago to oversee the more than 50 post offices, stations, and branches in the city, and assign new customer service managements to the locations with highest grievance payouts. The district also oversaw 2 dedicated teams, one to track all of our RFIs and another to work directly with union representatives. And that's what they should be doing, to be honest. These actions significantly reduced overall grievance payouts, with noncompliance payments decreasing 76%. And RFI grievances also decreased by 88%. All right. They identified that the highest overtime-related grievance payments by district are as follows, and it goes in order, from 1 all the way up down to the bottom. Ohio 2 district, they're the worst offenders. California 1, Colorado Wyoming district, Washington district, California 2 district, Illinois 1 district, West Shores processing, Minnesota North Dakota district, Florida 3 district, and Idaho, Montana, Oregon district. Those are the top offenders for overtime related grievances. And in terms of crossing crafts, they're trying to account here for the large amount of pay for crossing crafts. They divided it by craft. So mail handlers, they've had $36 million in crossing crafts. Clerks, $31 million. Carriers, about $10 million. Maintenance, $1.5 million. Rural carriers get $800,000. Motor vehicle service, $143,000. Other, $114,000. So that talks about crossing craft grievances. That's number one offenders is mail handlers and clerks. No wonder the APW has so much money in payouts. Additionally, Management performing bargaining unit work accounted for at least 40 million in grievance payouts from 22 to 24. One of the larger issues surrounding this type of work involved management in at least 16 districts violating an MOU attached to the Postal Service's and APW's national agreement by performing time and attendance collection system entry duties. So that's talking about the T7 being violated because management is doing their duties in terms of editing clock rings. We all have heard that grievance before, and they're saying that that's one of the biggest offenders of management crossing crafts. Also, let's see. According to district and facility management, overtime and cross-craft grievances were partly caused by issues related to staffing. For example, some management reported persistent turnover, particularly among employees assigned to afternoon or evening shift. Some employees were unaware they could be assigned to any shift. And, however, we compared the Postal Service's nationwide employee availability to the total grievance amounts paid for each quarter during 22 to 24 to determine if there was a possible correlation between these two metrics. So they're trying to say that potentially staffing has a lot to do with additional grievances. So let's move on. We determined that as employee availability decreased, the total grievance amount paid increased. For example, during quarter one of fiscal year 24, the Postal Service employee availability was 80.9%, the highest scope, period, while total grievance payments were only 47.9 million. The lowest during the same period. Conversely, during quarter four of fiscal year 2023, employee availability fell to 78.7% and payments rose to 101 million, the highest of the period between 22 and 24. This pattern suggests lower staffing levels may increase reliance on overtime and cross-craft work, thereby contributing to higher grievance costs. Ooh, wow. Something we've been talking about, staffing. Amy Tyvan, I know you're out there. I know you are finally getting some staff. I'm glad about that. There's many of you who are dealing with this situation, and of course, lack of staff creates more issues. In addition to staffing challenges and limited use of the OT admin tool, local management also attributed supervisor inexperience in managing grievances and overtime. Oh, surprise there. Many supervisors had less than 3 years of experience in the position and prioritized operational goals over labor compliance. Whoa. You think that's happening? I don't know. I never heard of that before. Management in several districts also cited supervisor understaffing and turnover as a barrier to developing consistent knowledge of grievance processes, collective bargaining agreements, and union relations. We have other work reviewing new efforts aimed at creating more consistent leadership at local units through the Relief Supervisor Initiative. All right, so we're going to keep going here. They're talking about getting management trained. Awareness of requirements such as lead clerks performing tax entries was inconsistent across all districts. For example, some managers knowingly violated the agreement due to limited staff, while others were unaware it existed. Postal Service headquarters offered various labor relations courses through its labor library. Well, I don't think they ever have time. There were 2 courses listed as active in LMS. Grievance Prevention and Article 15 Grievance Procedure that had attendance data. Of the 624 management personnel at the facilities we reviewed, 569, 91%, did not complete the grievance prevention, and 557, 89%, did not complete Article 15. The national agreement requires good faith in grievance settlements at the lowest step possible because management and the unions are encouraged to resolve disputes through mutual agreement. All right, so not all labor costs exist in the form of grievance payments. Management and the union stewards also spent significant time researching and resolving grievances. From 2022 through 2024, costs for steward time average about $80 million annually. Because management does not track their time by specific activity, we could not quantify costs related to managing grievances. Finally, unresolved grievances may also escalate to arbitration, increasing financial exposure. During the scope period, 2,968 district-level arbitration cases resulted in more than $166 million in grievance payouts, and arbitration expenses averaged $2.8 million annually for fees, travel, expert witnesses, and court reporting. So if you take that 166 and you add it to the already 800 and some change million that they spent on the payouts, that's a whole $1 billion wasted because they're idiots, because they want to violate the contract, and they don't have any respect for what we need and what our labor agreements say. Without mandatory and comprehensive training on grievance management, union agreements, and the effects of grievance mishandling, local management is at significant disadvantage in navigating labor relations. Managers and supervisors who lack a full understanding of contractual obligations and grievance procedures are more likely to make inconsistent or uninformed decisions. Wow, that's pretty surprising. Just kidding. Additionally, insufficient oversight of overtime, cross-craft issues, and management performing bargaining unit work, as well as insufficient staffing levels, continue to contribute to increased grievance payments and associated costs. From 22 to 24, management incurred about $83 million involving overtime and cross-craft payouts that were a result of violations of national agreements with multiple unions. So here's where their first 4 recommendations come from. Let me see. First 5. We recommend the Vice President, Labor Relations, provide remedial or refresher training to management handling grievances in areas of concern, to include topics such as, but not limited to, knowledge of national bargaining and local agreements, and so on. Recommendation 2. We recommend the Vice President, Labor Relations, develop a platform to share best practices identified by individual districts on grievance management. Recommendation 3. We recommend the Chief Retail and Delivery Officer and Executive Vice President and Chief Processing and Distribution Officer and Executive Vice President require the use of overtime administration tool at facilities with higher recurring overtime grievances. Number 4, we recommend the Chief Retail and require and reiterate training for supervisors on proper administration of overtime, including but not limited to overtime desired list, equitable distribution, and craft jurisdiction rules. Recommendation 5, we recommend the Vice President, identify higher recurring grievance payments locations, require applicable local management in those locations to develop and implement an improvement action plan to reduce grievances. And 3, grievance process in those locations, monitor it. Postal Service's response to these 5. Management agreed with the finding and recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In subsequent correspondence agreed with monetary impact. Regarding recommendation 1, management stated they will provide refresher training by or before September 30th. Regarding recommendation 2, management stated that they will share best practices with labor relations. The target date is March 31st. Regarding recommendation 3, management stated they will explore technological improvements in overtime admin and will continue to encourage the use of the tool with an implementation date of September 30th, 2027 this time. Regarding recommendation 4, management stated that retail and delivery personnel will be required to take an online course titled OT Admin, and that has a target date of September 30th, 26. And recommendation 5, they said they will continue to identify the highest 5 offices who incur the greatest amount of grievance activity or payouts, and they will address root cause problems in contract compliance in these locations with target implementation date of September 30th, 2026. OIG considers management's comments responsive to the recommendations, and corrective actions should resolve the issue identified in the report. Okay, moving on. Finding number 2, oversight and storage of local agreements. Field management entered into LMOUs or other binding local agreements that contain perpetual or escalating remedies that did not always align with current operational needs. Let's see. After 5 agreement in the Texas 2 district allowed payments to carriers delivering mail after 5 p.m. in addition to overtime. The agreement has remained in effect for over 30 years without revision and has expanded in scope, continuing to cost the Postal Service increased grievance payouts without resolving the original issue. These payments for the After 5 agreement have totaled about $15 million, which made up half of the district's total amount paid during the scope period. As shown in Figure 9, these payouts have trended upwards since 2010, with spikes in 2015 to $3.2 million and 2016 to $5 million. After some fluctuations, and the amount increased further in 22 to 5.2 and again in 24 to 5.3. District management indicated that After 5 agreement was originally conceived after a mail carrier was attacked while delivering mail after dark. The monetary payment terms were initially to provide incentive to then Houston District Management to streamline operations so that mail carriers can complete their mail deliveries and return to the office by 5 p.m. More recently, in 23 and 24, changes to processing operations of the district, along with the opening of a new processing facility, resulted in mail flow changes district-wide where delivery facilities received mail from the print plant later than before. In response, district management created a later carrier start time of 9 a.m. at all post offices, stations, and branches in the district. This start time virtually guaranteed full-time carriers to receive the After 5 payment based on a full 8-hour workday. As the end of 2025, these payments reached $6.2 million, which was a 17% increase from the same period last year. Here's another example they're going to give you. As far back as 2001, the then Corvallis, Oregon postmaster agreed to provide non-monetary remedies for each instance management did not provide the local NALC branch with a properly executed PS Form 1723. These remedies included providing an agreed-upon amount of food items, such as donuts, bagels, and an assortment of meats and cheeses, for the entire post office staff on a given day. When management and the NALC representatives agreed upon these terms in 2001, the quantity and variety of food items began with a set amount, which increased over time. But by 2023, the quantity and variety of food items to be provided from a single violation had further expanded. So this is funny. From 2026, they're stating that it used to be 4 dozen assorted fresh bagels, 16 ounces of cream cheese, assortment of no less than 3 8-ounce jars of jelly, assortment of sliced meats equal to no less than 3 pounds, and no cheese requirement. And in 2023, so that was 2006. By the time 2023 came, their new agreement was 7 dozen donuts or bagels, 48 ounces of cream cheese, assortment of no less than 6 8-ounce jars of jelly, assortment of sliced meats equal to or no less than 8 pounds, and 4 pounds of Swiss and cheddar cheese. Well, good for you guys. Good for you guys. An LMOU, here's another example. An LMOU that has been in effect for several years between management and unions in the California 1 and 2 districts allowed carriers to receive grievance payments if they delivered mail to a zip code outside of their assigned route. These situations would most likely occur when a carrier was unavailable and another carrier whose regular route covered a different zip code assumed the route. Since a replacement carrier may incur overtime to deliver both routes, overtime grievances involving the overtime desired list could also apply. District management indicated this LMOU presented minimal operational concerns when first agreed to due to higher mail volume. However, with a recent declining mail volume and some zip codes generating limited mail, this agreement may not reflect current operational needs. Additionally, district management did not always maintain or update a centralized repository that contained local agreements. In the reviewed districts, management could not always provide or locate copies of LMOUs or agreements we requested. Specifically, two district labor relations offices did not have copies of the requested agreements on hand, nor did they have a repository of LMOUs on their intranet website. Another labor relations office had an agreement repository on their local shared drive accessible by users in that district only. This indicated there was no standard approach or consistent implementation across all districts. All right, so they're just talking about now, they have a few paragraphs about how, they got to have a repository. So, that being said, I'm glad they gave us those shout-outs. Thank you, OIG. Those are great agreements. I don't think you're in the right place to tell us that it needs to be revised. Those are kind of precedent, so I don't necessarily agree, but management could always use the argument of undue burden, and they don't normally do. And it's a hard burden to prove for undue burden. But let's keep it going. For this particular one, they have two recommendations. Number 6, officially recommendation 6, but first one for this topic. We recommend that you identify which management positions have the authority to enter into local agreements, and 2, include risk management practices such as expiration dates, legal review, or mandatory periodic review clauses for management responsible for negotiating future local agreements, and 3, create a digital repository for local agreements. And then number 7, I know the numbers are funny because that's just the way they numbered it. Number 7, develop and maintain a national repository for local memorandums of understanding for standardized ease of access by and for all levels of local management. Now, in this, management got a little salty. All right, Postal Service response. Management disagreed with finding 2 and recommendation 6, but agreed with recommendation 7. Regarding the finding, management stated that a mandate to catalog every local agreement, MOU and grievance settlements would produce no meaningful institutional benefit, as the vast majority are routine administrative instruments with no policy consequence whatsoever. Regarding recommendation 6, management stated that some of the actions proposed in the recommendation are constrained by national contractual provisions. Regarding recommendation 7, management stated that during 2026, labor relations will, in conjunction with district labor relations, accumulate all LMOUs. HQ labor relations will then explore technological solutions that can effectively and efficiently store the quantity of documents that will be received. The target implementation date is September 30th, 2026. The OIG has a response. Regarding management's disagreement with finding 2, the OIG takes issue with management's assertion that the majority of local agreements are routine administrative instruments with no policy consequence, as we reviewed 3 local agreements with substantial impact, one of which resulted in millions of dollars in perpetual payments annually. These examples demonstrate that agreements can evolve into increasingly burdensome obligations and can have substantial lasting financial and operational consequences. Regarding recommendation 6, management was not specific in the response about which actions proposed are constrained by negotiated contractual provisions. The OIG maintains that identifying which management positions have the authority to enter into local agreements is a necessary internal management practice. Once identified, these managers could be taught risk management practices for negotiating future local agreements to better equip them for negotiations. Further, management agreed that a repository of LMOUs would be helpful, but objected to a mandate to catalog every LMOU and grievance settlement, which was not part of our recommendation. We will pursue this disagreement through the audit resolution process. Well, good for you, OIG. Regarding recommendation 7, we consider management's comments responsive and corrective actions should resolve the issue identified in the report. Okay, moving on. Grievance decision letters. This one's not so important, and I know this episode's really long, so I'll kind of summarize it, but management has a system called GATS. That's kind of where they get most of this stuff in. If you were to file a grievance, if there's a payout, it must be recorded in GATS. If there's not a payout, it must be recorded in GATS if it's at Formula A. I'm not sure with any other reunion, but that's how it is with NALC. And so they're talking about here, finding number 3. This is the third and final finding. They're talking about grievance decision letters and input into GATS, decision letters in GATS. They found that management did not consistently include sufficient support in GATS for grievance payments during the informal grievance process. The informal grievance process allows an employee's immediate supervisor to settle the grievance. Specifically, at 208 randomly selected grievance payments reviewed, 199, 96%, totaling $31,000, did not have complete information reported in the justification or rationale statements on the GATS decision letters. Of the 199 payments, required elements of the justification were missing, such as payee's name, contract violation dates, descriptions, lump sum payment amounts, and the number of hours adjusted. There's a whole table telling you how many they found of each one, but I don't think that's necessary to go over. They talk about how supervisors have to be specific and identify everything in the GATS decision letters. So, with that being said, let's see. They talk about recommendation 8. Oh, here's one thing before we go into the recommendation. They actually do say something that is specific. Informal grievances, so the first step, comprised of 39% of the total $866 million paid out. So it comprised of $336 million. So that's kind of cute. You know, let's hear about that. $336 million was informal A. The rest of the $866 million was formal A and beyond. All right. So, without required GATS decision letters for these informal grievances, management cannot always verify whether grievance payments settled locally are accurate and complete, which increase the risk of improper or erroneous payments. We identified about $201 million in costs due to grievance payments processed with incomplete decision letters. If not mitigated, this may increase the risk of future improper payments. Okay, so now let's talk about recommendation 8. Develop automated controls in the grievance and arbitration tracking system and add system-required fields for justification statements or decision letters. Provide refresher training for supervisors on requirements for proper completion of decision letters. Okay, Postal Service responded. Management disagreed with finding 3. And the monetary impact, stating the grievance file should contain any necessary supporting documentation for the decision or settlement made. Regarding recommendation 8, management agreed, stating they will make justification a required entry field for informal lump sum payments. Additionally, management agreed to provide training for supervisors. The target implementation date is September 30th, 2026. I don't know why all these September 30th. So OIG responded to Postal Service's response. He said, regarding finding 3, our audit was based on Postal Service requirements that establish GATS as a repository for documentation to support grievances. Related settlement payments. We maintain decision letters stored in GATS should be able to consistently be accessed by management or authorized users, regardless of location, enabling increased oversight and monitoring as physical files can grow large over time and are susceptible to being misplaced or overlooked. Regarding management's disagreement with the monetary impact, the OIG maintains that $201 million in monetary impact represents the financial exposure resulting from inadequate controls and documentation practices, including management's own assertions of inadequate supervisory practices. Regarding recommendation 8, we consider management's comments responsive, and their corrective actions should resolve the issues identified in the report. You sold yourself a little bit short there, OIG. I think you should have put that one in because they were being snappy. But anyway, Postal Service faces ongoing challenges of management inconsistent grievance handling and insufficient oversight of overtime, improper work assignments, and outdated or open-ended local agreements. These conditions have contributed to persistent grievance payments, arbitration awards, and operational inefficiencies. Going forward, it is crucial that the Postal Service strengthen labor relations and reduce financial exposure by enhancing supervisor training, completing proper documentation, and improving its management of grievance activity and overtime. Oh, you wish the world out of these guys, OIG. Come on. You think they're going to even complete a quarter of that? Come on. Additionally, The Postal Service should consider reviewing all local agreements and pursuing collaborative efforts with the union to update outdated provisions to allow it to better align contractual obligations with current operational needs and promote long-term financial sustainability. All right, so that is the juice. That is all the juice. If you want to go see that, you can go to, I'm going to put this on, I can't put it on the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook because it's 31 pages. But what I'll do, if anyone contacts me on the Parcels of Knowledge Facebook via Messenger, I will send them a copy. Happily. Send them a whole copy. But if you want to look it up online, you can go to the OIG website where you can look up that particular report number. I'm going to repeat that report number in case you need it. 25-068-R26. All right, so moving on, I just want to say this is how the OIG does things, and I love it. I love it because if you go to that website and you look at all these reports, they are a perfect source because they are the service, telling the service that they need to improve and that they're doing things wrong. A lot of our grievances where there's a gray line between whether it's a violation and whether it's not a violation, a lot of times these guys are on our side. You know, we got to start using their own words. And by that I mean we got to start allowing these into our case files, like for example with undelivered mail. That's a perfect example. If you say, look, the OIG is saying that this is a violation of law, the only people not is local management because the OIG says it, we say it, 2 out of 3. You know, that should be a good argument, especially because the OIG should know the law. They're kind of responsible for that in a way. But we don't utilize these resources enough. And I think we start doing that, you know. Other than that, I'm going to wrap it up here. But don't forget to send me your David Grosskopf questions. I do want to talk about, we got a lot of new stewards from our branch training. I'm happy for them, and I'm very glad that we got a lot of people to step up and become, stewards and advocates. This is beautiful. I hope it's great. The people from Shores, the people from Warren, we got one guy from Roseville, and I'm glad they're doing class today. They're in what they call SOS 1, School of Stewards 1. Thanks Arnone, thanks Brianne Andemick, thanks David Hicks and Scott Perez and hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody, but you guys are great. I am Laureen Constance, awesome person. You guys are stepping up, and I know I'm probably forgetting some names, but forgive me. Bob Elliott, he's one of them. Forgive me though, because I'm passionate about the fact that you're stepping up, and I love it. And thank you so much. And before I go, I do want to let you know, next we're going to have an episode jointly with the APWU, just like we did before. Eric Charnaby, he'll be our guest again. We're going to ask 3 questions. That was actually supposed to be today's episode. But this fascinating report fell into my lap yesterday, and I wanted to talk about it. I've been waiting to talk about this shit. $1 billion in waste. Down the drain. Just wait until, they try and use this against us. I really hope they don't. But, this is fucking ridiculous. All because management wants to mismanage. It's completely a choice. It's not like things that are unavoidable. It's a choice. And it's not even our fault. It's management's fault. They need to fucking get their shit together. I'd be fine if we got $0 as long as they got their shit together. But if you're violating the contract, I'm either going to make you stop, and if I can't put the cuffs on you, baby, we are going to make our carriers rich while trying to do so. And that is the bottom line. You only speak in money sometimes. And we just got to make it clear that we need you to stop doing this shit. All right. I'll get off my soapbox. Hopefully, you learned something valuable today. And, as always, you have a good day.
If these guys are getting educated, we will be in big trouble.
Management's been weighing you down like a bag of wet catalogs, but you don't gotta take it. You strap on the elbow of education, dig it?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now. The Grievance genius, the Roseville Wrecking Ball, doing amazing work.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.